today. So one is for the talk that Meredith will talk about. The other is for the Hackathon, the EDIE Hackathon that we're kicking off today. I'm the director of EDIE, which is an additional major in the College of Engineering, stands for Engineering Design, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship. I also work at the Integrated Innovation Institute. Our interviewer today, our moderator, is Pranitha. Pranitha is one of our master's students in the Integrated Innovative Products and Services program. She also happens to be working, she's perfect for this. One, she's an outstanding student. Two, she's working on a project for Volvo's trucking and construction equipment. I guess division or company, I don't know what it is, but and they're working on a prompt around women in heavy industry. So she's the perfect person. I'm going to just like give her out, of course, that she could have us today. So thank you, Pranitha, for being here and doing the interview.
Great. Thanks, Mark. All right, well, thank you all for coming. This is going to be such an excellent talk. I've known Kristy for a while. We trusted her and her company to get our whiskey all over the place when I had a whiskey company, and I'm so thrilled that she's here at Carnegie Mellon to talk with you all today. So this is the final talk in our Family Business Initiative series for this year. The Family Business Initiative is a joint effort between the Tepper School of Business and the Swartz Center for Entrepreneurship, where you're sitting right now. And I want to thank the Swartz team for hosting us and making this happen. So Alex over there and Sean in the back there, both of whom are there he is. And Allison and Sonia, who are also hiding right now, all really helped to pull this together. So with no further ado, Kristy Knichel is a proud Pittsburgh native and a second-generation logistics executive. She's been at the helm of her company since 2007 when she succeeded her father as president. In 2009, she became the majority owner, solidifying her role as a trailblazer in an industry traditionally dominated by men. Under her leadership, Knichel Logistics has grown exponentially, achieving certified women's business enterprise and women-owned small business status and reaching an impressive $100 million in annual revenue by 2022. I just want to pause on that. It's so profoundly impressive, this business that she has grown and built. It is very few business leaders that grow a business to this scale. Kristy's strategic vision and relentless drive have positioned Knichel Logistics as a top-tier service provider within the intermodal marketing community. She has diversified the company's offerings to include over-the-road brokerage, less than truckload, and specialty services while spearheading continuous technology enhancements to improve operational efficiency. Her goal is ambitious yet attainable to elevate Knichel Logistics into the top 50 logistics brokers in the U.S. She's a recognized leader in her industry. She's received so many accolades, including the Distinguished Woman in Logistics Award, the 2020 Influential Woman in Trucking Award. She serves as the Intermodal Logistics Conference Chair on the Transportation Intermediaries Association Board of Director. And in 2022, she became the only woman named as an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in the East Central region. She is really focused on continued growth. I'm sure that will come through today. She also lives here locally in Grove City, PA. She's a Steelers fan. She's got a son and a husband, and she enjoys camping, and she's just an incredible leader that we are so lucky to have here and to kick off the Hackathon.
Thank you. Awesome. Kristy, it's a pleasure to meet you again, and you have such an amazing introduction. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I'll go ahead and get us started. I'd love to first start into digging deeper into being a woman in the male-dominated industry. What are some of the barriers that you see here?
I see a lot of men out there, first of all. Thank you for being here, because we need men to help lift women up in the industry. But one of the first barriers I'm going to say is men in the industry. That can deter women from coming into the industry. It can be intimidating at times. When I first started, I was 19, and I really didn't know that. But I will say the industry's gotten a lot better today. I'm in my 28th year actually, so it's interesting to see that change over time. Another barrier would be like work-life balance for some women. I think just the challenge of not seeing more women in the industry, and mentorship opportunities really didn't exist, I would say probably until, I mean, not that they didn't exist at all, but the last 5 years in particular, it's really come to fruition. And that's something I do personally. I do a lot of mentorship, not just with women, but with men.
Yeah, and I guess with this being, very unique position, being a woman in a male-dominated industry, are there opportunities that you see for women in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I know this is focused on women because, we know there's a lot of men in the industry, but technology is probably the biggest thing now, I would say. Technology has just, really exploded over the last 5 years. I think that's, a really big piece of it, data analytics. And then like with my company or most companies that do what we do, there's operations roles, there's customer service roles, sales, marketing, all different kinds of roles you wouldn't think of that maybe are in logistics. I think when people think about logistics, I think the perception is just truck drivers, mechanics, that type of thing. But then there's the people like us that have to arrange all of those things to happen to get your product from point A to point B. So there's a lot of different moving parts that happen. And in my company, I would say it's probably about 60% women are in my company. I have about 54 employees. And I have women in every single one of those roles that I just mentioned. And I'd like to highlight too that my salesperson of the year for the past 3 years has been a woman. I also have an agent network, and it was an agent-owned or woman-owned agent that was our agent of the year as well. So there's a lot of success for women in this industry, so it's really important that we get that word out there.
And for you personally, how did you choose to enter this field, and what was your journey like?
So I have an interesting story. I was a hard worker. I worked 2 to 3 jobs. I moved out when I was 18, tried college. It wasn't my thing. I know I'm here. It's important for what you guys are doing. But I was running a pizza shop, and I wanted to purchase the pizza shop. And I approached my dad about that, not asking him to pay, but this is what I wanted to do. My dad had owned a pizza shop in the past. I actually didn't know until I approached that. And interesting enough, he said I wouldn't be happy doing that. I thought making $45,000 a year at that time when I was 19 was great. But he actually convinced me to come work for him, and I honestly didn't really know exactly what he did. So I took the leap when I was 19, and I just started working for him. So again, I didn't know it was a male-dominated industry, but I can tell you very quickly, as I learned through the ranks, I had carriers at times that didn't want to talk to me because I was a woman. I had customers that said, hey, get your manager on the phone. And I'm like, I am the manager. They didn't want to talk to me. So that was definitely challenging at my young age. I would say I was probably 22 at that point. But again, it just goes back to that's how the industry was, and it's not necessarily like that today.
And you were 19, you were very young at this point. How, I guess from your experience, how can we increase women, just awareness for women?
I would say, a lot of it is, having talks in schools, whether it's high schools, colleges, having internship programs, the mentorship programs. A couple things that I do, we work with Robert Morris University here in Pittsburgh. They have a logistics program. So I'm actually going there next week to be on a Women in Logistics panel. We get to have a career day, meet with the students, and then it's also a pipeline for people to come work for us. So I've hired 3 women from that program, and they got to learn more about, they might have been, say, a marketing degree, marketing major, but getting that certificate in logistics, knowing you can do that with a logistics company, of course, or any company out there. But it's been a great way, I think, to get awareness out there. And because I've been successful in the industry, one of the things I did early on that I didn't want to do was put myself out there and speak. And I do speak a lot, whether it's on panels or coming to events like this. And I'm also a co-host on 2 podcasts. One is called Empowering Women into Logistics, and another one is Ladies Leadership Coalition. So those 2 are encouraging women in the industry, to further themselves if they want to learn from us, and then just putting their voices out there. Because a lot of times I think when I even started doing podcasts, people that get invited are usually well established. I'm inviting women that are not. I want them to learn the experience and know that we support them as leaders in the industry so that they can continue to work on themselves if they want to continue to go in different roles or leadership roles, or maybe it's not even leadership, but just have that community. I always tell women, you know, you got to find your tribe, build your network, and for anyone in this room, that's probably the biggest thing that you need to do, and start doing it now at this age, because I didn't do it at that young age. But I have a huge network now, and that's really helped me in my career.
Mm-hmm. That's very important for sure. And I want to go back to technology. You
Yes.
briefly mentioned this earlier, and I'd be curious to learn, how does technology play a role here? Do you see that the skills that are required for these jobs in the heavy industry are changing because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say when COVID hit, hate to keep bringing that up, I feel like every speech I give, but that really changed supply chain significantly. And a lot of players came into our space, not just on the trucking side or my competitors, but a lot of technology, trying to fix the issues in the supply chain. It's probably the first time you all saw things on the TV about the ships sitting out there in the ocean. And so it really created a mess in our industry. So all these tech companies did come in, a lot of them trying to fix problems that I don't think you can fix. And some of them realized that. And then there were ones that could fix some problems. And maybe not fixing problems, but making it more efficient. And some of those things I would say right now a big thing is AI, of course. I think that's everywhere. But in what we do, there's companies that are building AI out there that are making bots that are actually speaking to probably another human, maybe another bot, but they're negotiating rates. They're trying to find a truck to cover a shipment. It's very wild to me to listen to these conversations, because you don't even know it's not a human, and how they go back and forth. We have not invested in that technology because it's super expensive right now, but that's pretty much taking up the role of a human, about 80% of what they do. And not that you want to replace people in these roles. The problem is it's hard to find people in these roles. And logistics companies, no matter how big you are, the margins are very slim for the most part. There are certain sectors like Expedite that have bigger margins. But I can tell you for my company, just to share, I mean, on the intermodal side, which is the biggest piece, I mean, it's a 10% margin as an average. And that's not a lot at the end of the day when you're, you know, trying to build a business and be profitable. So to afford some of that technology can be challenging. But in the same token, we have to dabble in some of it. And then the more technology providers that come into the space, it brings the price down and makes it more affordable for companies like myself that are out there competing against billion-dollar companies. You know, and I would say some other stuff is just automation that happens so that our people only are dealing with the exceptions. And I think that's a big key so that they can spend more of their time on the most important things, which are really more the customer-facing stuff. Whether a shipment, a lot of things in transportation don't go very well at times. It's not just picking up a shipment at a shipper and bringing it to a store or destination. And sometimes that works well, but you're dealing with appointment times, you're dealing with you know, weather, storms, challenges on the highways, on the railroads. A lot of times the trains aren't on time. And sometimes you're having to always reschedule shipments, or something happens and the shipper cancels their shipments. It's a lot of work behind the scenes. So there's technology out there that's really automating, creating efficiency for the teams. Because again, as a growing business, and we are growing in a market where most companies are not today, it's really important to find those people, and it's challenging to find people to do certain jobs. So I think the skill set is going to be needed for a lot of that technology. And the one thing my company implemented this past year, which I will just say is completely changing my company, is BI. Power BI with the data analytics, so that my people can have dashboards in front of them on a daily basis so they can see what they need to actually be paying attention to. Sometimes I say, I don't know how I got to this size without that technology, but we did. And now it's going to make it even better that we have that in front of every single leader on the team, no matter what team you're on, whether it's finance, operations, customer service. There's metrics that this data can tell a story. And I can tell you over the last month, we were in a crunch to really get some of this data out there to fix some issues where money was going out the back door, because you don't really see it until a month later. We need to see it today, tomorrow, so we can fix it now.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think
Yes.
something just as simple as just analyzing your data properly can be very impactful for sure.
Absolutely.
And I know you've been in the industry for a long time. You've done a lot, and you've seen maybe some parts of it, through your family. I'd kind of love to understand how the family business sort of impacted your view of the industry, or did it at all?
I don't know that it impacted my view of the industry. I think what happened with me was I came into the company, I was a hard worker, I just did whatever was needed. So my brother and sister also worked in the company at the time, and I don't think any of us realized we were interviewing for roles down the road. And my dad, I think, kind of caught on to me pretty fast, and I am proud to say that I've done every role in my company, from dispatch to finance, HR, claims, booking trucks, pricing. I've done it all. So I have a deep understanding of the challenges of the business, and also understanding, like, from the employee perspective, the customer perspective, the vendor perspective. It's just a different perspective in general, and I think I was just focused on, like, this could actually be something big. When I was that young at the time, I don't think I even realized the opportunity that I had, to be honest. But as I probably got more towards 27 is really where I was like, this could really be something big. I will say it was challenging working for my father. I put my resignation in twice. Convinced me to not leave, but he had to calm down, because the way that he led was not the way that I lead. I think one of the things I talk about is he made me a stronger leader by being tough on me, but I also learned what not to do. I think there's other ways to teach people to get things done, or how you need to do it, other than the way that my father did. But I am very proud that I got to work with him, because I don't think I would be the leader I am today without how tough he was on me. So I think that's very valuable in a company, because a lot of times, I even talked to someone yesterday where, they look at CEOs different, and if you haven't done what they've done, sometimes there's not a respect there for them. And when I can say that I've done your job, I sat in your seat, I understand what that means and how challenging it is, there's definitely a respect there. And I talked yesterday, we had hired 3 new people, and I take them to lunch and talk to them about my journey and experience, because I want them to know how important they are to my company, but that I also understand what they're doing in the company. I'm not just up here making decisions and all those type of things. There's purpose behind it.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about how you lead, and that being very different from your father. I'd love to learn about your early days as a CEO, stepping into that position.
Yeah, I would say one of the first things I did was Google, what does a CEO do? To be quite honest. My dad was a great sales guy, but he wasn't the type of guy that could teach me things that I was supposed to be doing or knowing. So it was challenging. I did put myself, so I quit college, but I put myself in Sandler's Sales Institute. I took classes in finance. I went back and did those things. My dad didn't know why I needed to, but I had to. I convinced him, can I work with a consultant that's going to help me, a coach, and really help me figure out what I need to work on. And then a little bit, I would say a few years after that, I got the confidence to then reach out to other CEOs of companies and ask them, how did you get to this size? How did you do this? And there's a lot of that's going on, I would say now, more than when I was in that seat, because back then it was kind of like you don't talk to your competitors, you don't reach out and ask for help. But I felt like I had to, because if I didn't, I wasn't going to succeed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when you sort of stepped into this role, what was that transition period like? Like succession is really, really important for family businesses.
It was hard. I will say it was hard from the family side of things. So my dad, even though he transitioned shares to all of us kids, my sister wanted my role. None of us really knew that, but it caused a lot of issues in the business, to where she wanted to be bought out of the business. And I knew she wasn't actually good for the business at one point, where she left the business, then wanted to come back, and I wouldn't allow her to come back. That was a big argument with my father. I knew that I had to be focused on the business and not the family, where my dad said, you need to take care of the family. I get that, but she's not the right person for the role. So I had to be a tough leader and kind of cut things off, because my dad actually he paid for a car that she had. She was still making a salary and didn't even work for the company. I had to cut all that off. My dad used to take a loan from the company. I wouldn't let him take a loan anymore, even though he paid it back. It's like, you have to understand that, family business or not, if you're not running the business like a business and people see that, why are they going to work hard for you? Why are they going to put their all and effort into it? So I made the tough decisions that my dad wouldn't make, and I got a lot of heat from it, even at times where he threatened to sue me. So I just feel like, it was challenging too, because he put me in a role where I was running the company, but I really wasn't. He would not listen to me, and I had to go through him to, get decisions done. He would, kind of tell me, like, that's not a good idea, we can't do it. But then I'd go to another man in the company, the CEO or COO that we had, or a sales guy that he was close with, and they would nudge my dad, and guess what? It was a great idea. So for years, I had to deal with that, but I found a way to figure it out until he was completely out of the company. I just had to continue to push back and find a way to get it done. So I would say that was probably the challenging part, especially knowing, like, you get put in this role because he has the confidence in you, but yet I really couldn't fully execute in that role in a way I should have been able to. But it's also about pivoting and finding a way to get it done, and that's what I think I've always been able to do in this business, whether it's market challenges or the family issues and challenges that we had. And today, I'm 75% owner of the company, and my brother's 25% owner, and I'll say we get along very well. He's not part of the leadership team, he just wants to do a job, and that works out very well. I did bring in a sales consultant because he handles some sales business for us. And that consultant is actually the person he really reports to. So we kind of keep a line between us, because I did have challenges with him, doing the things that I needed him to do, because he didn't want to do sales. Even to this day, he said, "You forced me to do 20 years of sales." I'm like, "It's not sales, it's really account management." He's handling the accounts that my dad founded the company with, which is roughly 20 million of our revenue. It's rice business out of California that we ship, and to me, it's really just visiting the customers, it's checking in with the customers, and he does really, really well at that, but it's something he doesn't necessarily want to do that I think he needs to do. So for me to hold him accountable would be more challenging and cause me more grief. So I found a way around that, and he works with this guy, and it actually works pretty well for the business.
That's clever. Yeah, I mean, I think your strength and, like, determination at every single decision point has been very, very evident, so thank you for sharing that. I would love to turn it over to everyone else to ask some questions. I think we have a microphone that will be getting passed around, and then I'll repeat the question here as well.
You can ask me anything. Is there anyone here thinking of getting into family business or business with your family? No?
Yeah, so earlier you said that your father made, like, a lot of tough decisions, like he was, like, a very tough leader, and you didn't necessarily agree with the way he led the company. And then later on you were talking about how you had to also make a lot of tough decisions that your dad couldn't, like, what's, like, kind of like I'm kind of confused a little bit on that. Could you elaborate more on
Sure.
So
what decisions you had to make, and, like, what exactly, like, your father did that you didn't necessarily agree with?
So I'll just repeat the question 1 second before I let you answer, so it's getting recorded. But the question was your dynamic with the father in the leadership position versus you, and how you handled those disagreements over there. Thank you.
Yeah, so my father used to stand behind me when I worked and faxed paperwork over a fax machine, making sure I typed in the number right, I guess, and I'm not even exaggerating. He literally would yell and scream. He probably caused the women in the office to cry almost on a daily basis. If I paid overtime, he threatened to fire me if I paid people overtime. It's the law. We need to follow the law. And again, I think he was a very, I would say, caring person and would do anything for anyone, but when it came to the business, he just had his way of doing things, and I call it an old school way of doing things, but it's not necessarily, legal or the best way to get someone to do something for you. He was not really appreciative. I can tell you part of my passion in this business and I think succeeding was the fact that he put me in a position to do that I felt like he didn't think I could do, but you put me in that position, so I'm going to prove to you that I can do this. So that's how I would say some of those differences are, and just the fact you put someone in a position to run the company and then you don't allow them to run the company. So what I do with my leaders is I give direction. We have a leadership team. We talk. I let them do their jobs, and I don't interfere with how they do their jobs. If something doesn't work, we sit down, we talk about it, and figure out where do we go from here. I am always appreciating my employees and telling them. I gave 5 employees this week personal cards that I wrote and sat them down and asked them, you know, what could we do better? What are things that you feel we need to take a look at? What can make your job more efficient? Those are the type of things, you know, my dad wouldn't do. And I don't know that back then that happened. I don't know, but I'm really engaged with the people in a different way that gets them excited and motivated. I think that's important. So, yeah, I hope I answered your question.
What would be one big piece of advice you would give someone who is interested in joining or starting a family business? How would you best separate that dynamic of family with business?
I would say, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just keep interrupting, but the question was the biggest piece of advice that you'd give to someone starting a family business.
I think it's having very clear, defined roles and job duties. I think my brother and my sister thought that because they owned the company that they were a part of every decision, they got half the money, that type of thing. It's like, no, your job is this. This is what you get paid for this. This is what the market salary is. This is what the expectation is. Because that was not clear in our family business, and that caused a lot of issues. And I think that that's extremely important up front, understanding whose roles are what and what do they mean. And ownership is totally different than having a job in the actual company, and understanding that that is a totally different scenario. And I'll give you another example too, where since I own the majority of the business, say when we do make money, we can take disbursements of money out of the company, but my goal is to build the business up, and you have to keep money in the company to continue to invest and grow. Where my brother continues to want me to take money out of the company and push because now we're making money, and he's not even understanding, no matter how many times I explain it, the goal of we're not going to get here if, you know, we don't have the money in the company. The last 2 years in the industry has been very crazy in the supply chain, very challenging. And if I didn't have money in the company, I might not be here today and survived in the business if we didn't have the money in the company to survive. So I think that's very important that there's clear expectations and job roles up front.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'll go and ask. Do you have any sales advice? I think logistics is definitely a sales-heavy industry. What have you learned? You said that you did some sales courses, things like that. So what advice do you have?
Yeah, so the question was about advice, about sales courses, and just what you've learned from.
Yeah, so I think, you know, no matter what role you're in, I think in the company, you're doing sales in one way or another. I tell my sales team it's about them selling themselves. It's their personality. If you go in trying to sell my business, just like any other company, that's not going to matter. I think the biggest thing is really building up your knowledge and experience on that, taking those additional courses to understand sales. But again, it's also about selling yourself, your personality, finding ways to connect with a customer on a personal note, whether it's you do the research and you find out they went to Ohio State or Carnegie Mellon, like whatever, so that you can actually reach out to them and have that conversation. I've had sales people that go into an account, they can't win the business. We switch it to another salesperson, they win the business. And a lot of times it is because of who they are, not because of my company, it's you yourself. So I think it is really taking the time to, whether it's a sales type thing or working with a sales consultant, but reaching out to other people that are in that industry that are doing sales and asking them. I think the biggest thing, I'm just going to repeat again, building that network of people that you want to be like. If you want to reach that goal of being a top salesperson, find salespeople to connect with. Go to events where salespeople are going to be at and talk to them, ask them questions, and start building it that way.
So you were talking about the personalized notes that you were sending to customers, and how, or not customers, but to employees, and how you wanted to keep have a more caring perspective, essentially. And I was wondering how much you try and run the business at times like a large business and at times like a small business, where you try and same time you're saying you want to keep it so you know the employees and you can understand them and have teams like that. So how does that breakdown work?
Yeah, so, sorry.
The question was about running the company, sometimes like a small business and a large business, especially being logistics and very distributed. But go ahead.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is we just moved into the Westinghouse campus in Cranberry. New, big, nice building, better place for the employees, daycare on site, cafeteria on site, gym on site. And I think some employees were like, I feel like we're not a family business anymore. The challenging thing is, as you're growing, and we've been going through growing pains the last 2 years, market issues in the supply chain. So there's times that you can't always be doing those things because you have to focus on the bigger picture. I will say right now my leadership team is all hands on deck in the woods right now, or in the weeds, however you want to say it. And that's not always going to be the case, but once we get out of that mode, it is stepping back and making sure that you're doing those things. My role specifically is to always want to be in touch with those people. I know there might be a day when I might have 200 people, and that's going to be very hard to always do that. But I think if I make an attempt on a weekly basis, even if it's just 5 a week, I made a commitment to my people 2 weeks ago that I would be sitting down with every single one of them for 15 minutes at least. The one ended up being an hour, which was totally fine, because there were some issues there. But it's important to me to understand from them how they see things. How can we make their job better? What challenges do they have? One thing I will say, we made a mistake as a company. My COO that's been running the company, he needs to be close to operations and in the weeds. And what I noticed is he was really just having those meetings with the managers. And I think when we moved into that building, and I feel like I looked around and it was like, what happened? We were in a spot where we were growing. We didn't have people that were good enough. We needed to get more people in. And I think a lot of it was him losing touch with everyone else and just having that top heavy, just bringing in the managers, you're not going to see all the stuff underneath that's going on. We can see in the numbers what's going on. And that's when I have to step in and say, this is what I need from you. So now I'm also having him do that. But I also realize he's grown in the business. He's been with me 20 years. And that's not his thing. So he's more of that data analytic number guy. So we are going to be bringing in a director of operations that's going to take that position, that's going to be in that position working with everyone on a daily basis, no matter what position you're in, because it's that crucial to the business, or any business, in my opinion, to stay close to it and have a pulse on it. If you don't, you can lose sight of it, and it did happen in my business, and had to reel it back in.
I have so many questions. I'm going to start with one. Kristy, you talked a little bit on the stairway up about the M&A landscape currently
Yes.
in logistics. Can you talk about what you're seeing in terms of transactions, how you're digesting that as a business owner? Anything you're willing to share?
So the question was about the M&A landscape in logistics and what you're seeing in that space.
Yeah, so I would say the transactions are going wild because we're in a space right now where companies, I can tell you there's roughly 350 companies a month going out of business in our space for the past 2 years. A lot of them are small trucking companies. When COVID hit again, a lot of trucks came into our space. They want to capitalize on the freight that was coming into the country and moving around. A lot of competitors came into our space that do what we do as well. So everyone did really well, and then when the market dropped. It fell off a cliff, and companies are trying to survive. We're still trying to survive through this. So right now, there's a lot of M&A action that is happening. My company in particular, I always get a lot of attraction from whether it's private equity or billion-dollar brokers that are out there that don't have the railroad contracts, because that's something that I have that most companies don't have. There's only 17 non-asset companies in the country that have the railroad contracts. So these companies that are out there just booking the freight on the truck side, they want to have that. So I'm getting a lot of attention, and I have actually for a long time. I was telling Meredith earlier, I was in a situation where I was thinking I had to possibly sell maybe 20% of my business to get more money in my business. So it's always good to have those conversations, and they're going wild, but I was able to get out of that situation and not have to go down that path, because you don't want to go down that path when you're not ready. Don't want to have to make decisions on the fly. I think that's why it's so important to be prepared for that. But I will also say at some point down the road, I do plan to sell my company. So I do think that that's important to have those connections and contacts that are out there, because you want to make sure that when you do that, you're going with the company for the right reasons, whether it's a strategic reason to get more money, or maybe it's a reason because you want to align with a company that's like yours. And I might not get as much money, but maybe they'll take care of the business better when I'm gone. So there is definitely a lot of that going on, especially when companies are in a position where they just can't afford to be in business anymore. And that's not a position you want to be in, because you don't get what you should get for the business at that time.
You mentioned how networking and really having that sort of connection is key. What's the best way to approach networking and approaching networking in general?
So the question is about best way to approach networking in general.
So I would say the biggest thing is in business in general, on LinkedIn. There's a lot of social media out there. I don't have time for the other social media, the fun stuff, maybe when I was younger, but LinkedIn from a business perspective is huge. And that's also following, connecting people that you want to be like, or that you find intriguing, that you want to eventually maybe talk to. Also finding conferences or events that you're going to, and making it, make a list basically of who you want to meet. I'm going to a conference in a couple weeks, and I'm getting tons of emails from people that want to schedule meetings with me and want to meet up with me. So those are always good ways to do it. And then just reach out to people, not just connect with them, but like reach out, send them messages. Hey, I'd like to get some more of your time and learn a little bit about how you did this or how you did that. I think that is so important. And I can tell you over the past few years, there's been a ton of people, I feel like, that never really did that before. And now that's all that we talk about, especially in our industry. So I really think doing the social media on the LinkedIn, because it's just a different kind of social media than your Facebooks and Instagram and stuff like that. Not that you can't do those, we all have them too, but from a business perspective. And look at people, for example, I'm talking to CEOs that own billion-dollar companies, and ones that even want to purchase me, so they're more willing to even help me too. But I always want to follow and reach out to the people that you aspire to be.
In the logistics industry, there are a lot of operational risks involved as well. So how do you balance the culture of innovation and resilience within the company? And I'm also curious to know what are some of the trade-offs that you need to consider.
So the question was about balancing risk with innovation and the trade-offs that exist here.
It's challenging. I'm a very risky person. I think that's why I've been in some positions that have been challenging to get out of, but I also feel like if you don't take the risks, you're not going to potentially get there. So I would say even just the balance is having the leadership team to bounce things off of. We went through an exercise this past week where I made everyone say something nice that they do well in the company, but also point out something they need to work on. And one thing that feedback they gave me was to not make knee-jerk decisions. When something happens, I just want to go with it. And I think sometimes that can be detrimental to a business, but sometimes I think you need to do it too and take that risk. So I think that that's important to have a team or other people to bounce those ideas off of. Did I answer that question for you properly? Okay, I want to make sure.
So you were talking about reaching out to the CEOs of other transport companies. How much, I don't want to call it sexism, but sexism do you see on kind of that upper business level still? Because you mentioned that the industry itself is better at that kind of aspect of this, but how much do you still see it on the upper business level?
So the question was about sexism at the upper business levels.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've definitely had some situations that I have been in, not necessarily at the top, but I can tell you that I hear about it because I do think people in power tend to think that they have, more right to certain things, whether it's the way they talk to you or treat you. So I think it's something that still needs to be worked on and talked about, which is why I do the podcasts that I do, specifically raising awareness around that. So it's still there. It's probably not as bad as it used to be, just because there's more women in the space in particular, and I think that always helps in situations like that.
Okay, well, I have a compliment and a question. One is, the CEOs that succeed, original founders, usually have very short tenures. It's a very hard thing to pull off and to grow. Like, that's incredible. Like,
Yeah.
you completely beat the odds on that one. But what I was interested when you were talking about the different leadership styles, right? Your dad to you. Like, how did you find your leadership style? And how has that adapted over time?
Oh, yes. So the question was about how did you find your leadership style and how has it adapted over time?
I think I found my leadership style because I didn't like the way my dad was talking to me and treating me. I was like, there's got to be a better way. That was a huge part of it, to be quite honest, but a lot of it too was putting myself in positions, whether it was the Sales Institute, becoming woman-owned and going to those events and working through the classes that they had. And again, I'm just a very trusting, nice person. My leadership team tells me I'm too trusting to a fault. I always want to give people the opportunity, but I just want to see people do well. And I think working with them in a better manner than my dad did, I think is always going to be helpful to someone. And I think adapting is when we've had these challenges that we've had. You all heard, that 100 million mark. I'm trying to get to 300 million. And we've had some challenges along the way, obviously, a lot of challenges. And I think you really start to learn who you are as a leader in general is going through those challenges. A year we lost money. It took 4 years to get out of that hole, but we figured it out. We lost money the last 2 years, actually, and it's been a lot of hard work to get out of the hole. I'm a different leader today than I was last year even. I had to realize that I had to work with my team differently, especially my COO that I just talked about. I had to put more pressure on him to change how he was doing things. I had to get uncomfortable, and I told the whole team we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because if you're not going to make decisions you need to. And I've just made myself very uncomfortable to do what I need to do because I refuse to fail. Like, that's just my attitude. I will not fail, and I will come out of this hole that we're in. And right now we are coming out of a bad spot that we were in, and I'm super excited about it because most companies cannot do, I feel like, what we've been able to do. It's been a lot of resilience, I would say. And digging deep, for sure.
I'll just say my question out loud instead of waiting for the mic, but you talked about how you're a large risk taker, and I also heard, something about lower profits, maybe losing money, and I've owned a couple businesses myself, maybe talking about how your decision making has or hasn't changed in those environments, and how you approach risk taking, when you're on the downward trend, because it always seems like risk taking is easy to do when you're on an upward trend. So maybe talking about those challenges.
So the question was about how do you take risks when you're on the downward trend? Because it's always easier to do it when you're growing and moving up.
Yeah, I would say, in the past, my COO was running the company, and I just kind of let him do it. But then stuff happens, and I'm like, it's because I wasn't being as involved as I should have been in really pushing that direction. And those are hard lessons to learn, to be honest, because then it's like, oh my God, we got to figure this out now. We have like a month, 2 months. You're right, like taking risks too. You have to do it, but then right now I can tell you we've been in a crunch mode for probably 6 months where now I have a whole team of people instead of just me and the COO, which I feel like, again, he's done a great job, but sometimes it's been challenging for just me to work with him. Now I have several different people, my director of sales, my controller, my head of marketing, and my head of our agent side that we have. She's worked in several areas and operations in the company. So now it's just not me and him talking or just him making decisions. Now it's all of us talking about it. And I really feel like that has been so beneficial, because when me and my COO don't agree, I might have 3 other people on my side over here. And we can talk about it in different ways, because he brings a different perspective than what I have. And I think having more perspective is better than just having the 1 or 2 perspectives. And I can say, coming out of the hole that we are coming out of, the data analytics has really been helpful, but it's also, you know, me having to figure out, how do I push the team and tell them they're not moving fast enough? And it's never going to be fast enough. We don't have enough resources to move as fast. Going back to Meredith's question on the M&A side, like if I brought in a private equity company and got millions of dollars, I could easily bring in more people to get this stuff executed faster. A lot of them tell me, why are you doing this so hard? Make it easier on yourself. Because I don't want to give up any of that ownership at this point, so we have to figure it out as a team. And I think that that's just the way we do it. And I have a lot of grit. Like I said, I think because my dad put me in a position and he didn't really allow me, it's like he didn't trust me. And part of it was, you know, I quit college. And he's like, well, you have to hire people that have college degrees. He just kind of went against everything that he said. And I just have this power inside me that's like, I'm going to prove that I can do this, when most people can't. Like Meredith said, getting to that 100 million, there's a very small amount of companies that hit that revenue level in the whole world. So it's not easy, but if you have that grit and that team around you that's better than you and being okay with it, I think that is so important. And just being okay with those people knowing they're smarter than you, because I don't know it all. So yeah.
So I'm also going to ask a question about like the risk of trying to grow the business. Like, how do you balance it versus the other goal, which is to try to keep the family business alive and pass it to the future generation? Like, how do you balance the risk of growing versus just keeping it running?
So the question is about, how do you balance the risk of keeping the business growing while also thinking about succession and passing it down to the family?
It's challenging because since we're a privately owned company, we're in a situation where there's only so much money to grow. And now we're in a situation where we're growing and I don't have enough resources, meaning people, to even handle the growth. So actually we sat down and talked about, how do we kind of scale back? Because sometimes you have to scale back to go forward again. And part of that was looking at the business that's maybe not as profitable, maybe business that's taking up a lot of time and the profit just isn't there, or maybe it's just bad business, it's challenging business. We're talking about that with one of the big customers I actually just landed this past year, Cisco Foods. I landed a $4 million contract, which doesn't typically happen right off the bat, but we're not making money on it yet. We were supposed to make money, but the way that the business operates, we're trying to still figure that out, and that's part of the process. Now we have to figure out, can we get this figured out? How much time do we have? Do we walk away from the business, or do we keep going? And those are tough decisions to make, because sometimes, like, we're in a position where my manager that's handling that account, she doesn't have the bandwidth to handle it, so she's making mistakes. There's things we have to address with the customer that's on their side. And do we go back and ask for more money and say, this is what we need to do? And it's not, say, because we misquoted it. A lot of times it comes down to the way that their business is operating that they don't tell you up front. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of drop trailers with them, and if they don't unload them timely, they might sit there for a week. Sometimes you have $1,000 in charges on one shipment. And they'll be like, well, we were supposed to pick this up yesterday. Well, they didn't notify us. And large customers can be very challenging to work through, so sometimes you have to just make those decisions to walk away. So it is challenging. I mean, when you talk about getting aside from the family, I always want to kind of keep that, but I also have to be cognizant of, as we get bigger, the business is going to change. A lot of things that we did when we were smaller, we can't do today. We have to have structure in place where maybe there wasn't as much structure. You have to be able to be fair amongst all employees. You can say there's unique situations, but one employee sees another employee taking more time off, working from home because we changed our work from home policy, it becomes an issue. And sometimes they don't understand why you need to do it. When your business is in a position we were in and didn't make money for 2 years, I needed people in the office more working as teams and collaborating. And they all think they can work better from home, but you don't learn that way. And if we hire new people, how are they going to learn if we're only in the office 3 days a week? I do allow them to still work from home on Fridays. There's not many that come in the office on Fridays, but I will say those are things that we have to change as we get bigger, and then try to find those little things on the family side, the little touches like me doing the personal notes and just checking in with people, I think is important, because there's only so much you can do as you're trying to do both, to be honest.
So you're not a low-cost provider in the industry. Talk about running a value-based business. Like, what's the challenges of like selling on value rather than low cost?
Yeah,
So
since
the
we're
question-
service. Oh.
So the question is about running a value-based business, and I'll let you continue.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard challenge because we have to sell service. That's all we have to sell. And we're up against competitors that have their own trucks, have their own equipment. And in some cases, I was talking earlier about JB Hunt is one of those big competitors out there. We can use them, but they're also a competitor. Sometimes there's lanes that are $400 to $600 higher than us, and we can't make money. We can't compete. A lot of us companies that compete against them, they just can't. So we have to be better at customer service and how we interact with our customer. Even in a bad situation, it's how you deal with the customer. Is how that experience is going to be for the customer. Even if it's we had a lot of theft in supply chain this past year and a lot of tequila stolen, to be honest. But in those situations, the customer's getting pretty furious, not just with us, but with the railroads and not getting answers. And when you're dealing with the railroads, they work very slow. They don't have a lot of answers right away. And it's how we handle the relationship with the customer. Whether we're getting them on the phone with the railroads, having meetings and going to see them, and it's really being personable with them, being in front of them as much as you can, because that's all you have. And the most important thing is to make sure your people have the training they need. That's one thing that we have not done an awesome job at, and we're trying to get better at it, but it's really sitting with your people, making sure they understand the importance, how they talk to the customers, how they're responding to the customers. If they send a message, which I've seen some horrible messages, and then telling them, hey, this is how I would say it next time. This is how you keep a customer engaged. And I will say, overall, we do, I think, a really good job. We actually just won Intermodal Carrier of the Year from Knichel Logistics, which is a huge accomplishment, especially when we're competing against these billion-dollar companies out there. That's all we have to sell is service. So it's really important that we make sure our employees understand that.
Well, I have a question while we wait. You mentioned you've been to conferences where you're like one of the only 2 women at this conference. I'd love to learn more about that story and how you find the confidence to be in a space like that.
Yeah, so when I was in my young 20s, going to the railroad events in particular, there would be 100 people in the room, and I would typically be the only woman at the time in the room. Over time, I may be one of 2 women on my side of the business, and there might be a couple from the railroad, which in the past, you wouldn't even see that. Now you have 2 railroads that have a president of the Union Pacific and a CEO of the BNSF railroads that are women now. I would say 20 years ago, you would never think that that was possible, but it is challenging. It can be intimidating, but I've had to learn to go up and just talk to the other people in the room. A lot of them are my competitors, but at the same time, if you don't do that, then you're never going to learn and be able to network with people, which I think is so important. Sometimes it's almost like you see the women standing in the corner and all the other people over here, and I think that's why it's so important to put yourself out there and have those conversations, because like I said today, it's still a thing on the rail side, on the trucking side of things, truck brokerage side of things. At those events, you'll see a lot more women than you would typically at a railroad event. It's just different. There's only a couple women on the rail side that even own a business in my space. On the trucking side, there's more women that own companies, but there's a lot more women in the business that goes to those type of events. I am on the Women in Logistics board at the Broker Carrier Summit, so that's another event that probably had 40% women, which is usually unheard of at those events, but it's becoming a bigger thing now, but not so much on the rail side.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Last question?
You mentioned kind of asymmetric values and recognizing relationships and networking. I guess, and then like that's how you go to market and go to business and win business. I guess, is there anything else that you see as an asymmetric advantage that you have from your perspective on the industry?
Yeah, so the question is about what asymmetric advantage do you have with your perspective on the industry?
You know, I think all the things that we just talked about are definitely important, but, you know, I think being a woman-owned business can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing at times too. But I do think just building out that network really, and working those relationships, learning about these people, whether they're your customers, vendors, same thing. We treat our vendors, that's extremely important. And vendors I'm talking about are carriers that are out there. Without these trucks on the road, none of us would be able to buy anything, but unfortunately they still get treated not so well. So I just think it's important to treat people the way that you would want to be treated, and just be curious and ask questions, reach out. I just think those things are just so important. You do that, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, my question, I'm curious because you mentioned, as a leader, how do you prefer to make decisions? Are you a person like relying on gut, your gut, or relying on data and the old school numbers?
Yeah, so the question is about, do you rely on your gut or do you look at the numbers?
So I'll tell you, my COO is the data number guy, and I will tell you mine's the gut. And even if he's saying one thing, I'm sometimes saying, well, I still don't feel like this is, you know, the path to go. But sometimes that's just on people, that feeling. But I can tell you a lot of times when I have that gut feeling and I can sit back, like I talked about when we moved into that building, and I feel like I could just see like what happened. And it was really like we knew we didn't have bench strength 2 years ago. We didn't work on it. And why didn't we work on, like I knew that my COO is like, I don't know what happened. I'm like, I know what happened. I can feel it. The numbers isn't going to tell me anything, you know, because a lot of times he'll say too, during COVID, or people did a lot more transactions then than they do today, and they feel overwhelmed. And he wasn't buying the fact that they were feeling overwhelmed. You've done this much 2 years ago. Why can't you do it now? And my gut was telling me there's just more things that are going on. Maybe they're burnt out because it's been really tough. And it took probably 6 months for him to really recognize that, you know what, they just can't do it. We need better people too that can process more, and maybe part of it is just switching out people. So one thing I am proud of is we built a company where more than half my people have been with me anywhere from 9 to 27 years. Unfortunately, a lot of those people now are going, whether we're having to terminate them or they're leaving the company because they're just not at the level we need them to be. And maybe part of it was, you know, the way that we did business then and the way business is now, burnout, all those different things. But I am a gut leader. I look at the data, and there's some things that we go by data, obviously, but I do tend to listen to my gut on certain decisions, depending on what it is. It's important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You guys join me in a round of applause for this. We very much appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.